Hi, this is Sam Black, and today I want to talk about some of the cards that aren't in my Commander Cube. So I previously made a video explaining what my Commander Cube is and how it's drafted, and today I want to talk about some of the cards that aren't in the cube for one reason or another and why they're not in. Ordinarily, the cards that are not in a cube aren't really that interesting because, well, there are a lot of cards and most of them aren't in most cubes. But because this cube is designed to play games like Commander, there are certain cards that are really impactful and common in the Commander format, and removing them or not including them in the cube makes the games play pretty differently than games of Commander that do have those cards, especially since a lot of these cards are cards that have what I would consider an outsized impact on a game of Commander. And so to me, uh, what's in the cube in a lot of ways isn't as important as what's not in the cube because a lot of these cards that aren't in the cube really have the potential to overshadow everything else, whereas all the cards that are in the cube kind of feel more like normal game pieces to me. And if you change any one card in the cube for any other card that you think is pretty interesting in Commander or just fun to play with or a pet card or whatever, it won't really change the experience that much. But if it's one of these cards that are specifically and intentionally not included, then it might have a more warping impact. So these are those cards. Some of them I have never included because they're clearly to me outside of the bounds of what I'm looking for in my cube. Others of them are cards that I have had in and have removed after playing with them, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, because I or my players didn't like the impact that they had on games. So I also think that this stuff is worth knowing and thinking about in other Commander contexts. This might highlight some cards that might be stronger than you think if you're trying to add power to one of your commander decks, or if you are trying to build a commander deck that plays at a lower or friendlier power level. This might be a list of cards that you should pay close attention to and see if they have a more game warping effect than you would like, and consider making sure that you're not abusing them or minimizing how many of them you're playing or only playing them in the right context if you are trying to avoid having a deck that is stronger than you might want for whatever reason in your games. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with playing any of these cards in Commander. Just these are cards that I've found impactful enough and to contribute to a kind of gameplay that isn't the kind of gameplay that I'm looking for in my cube. And so I guess what I'm saying is if you're looking for the slower board game style commander games in your own games, then some of these cards also might not be a good fit there. So with that said, I've grouped the cards that are not in my cube into kind of similar cards, as you can see on the screen here. Um, uh, just to make kind of information chunking easier. So this screen's pretty self-explanatory, right? Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Grim Monolith. These are some of the kind of iconic cards that really, give the player who draws them a big mana advantage, lets them cast things that are really strong really early. Players who draw these cards early tend to be one or more turns ahead of the other players, and that can often lead to them kind of being the breakout threat in the early game. Other players expect that they're going to need to kind of target them more to keep them in check. So I think that in my cube, most of these, because they're colorless, would be kind of pretty clear picks in most decks most of the time. It would be kind of weird to pass them a lot of the time. And I think that the draft portion is more interesting if there are fewer kind of like auto pick cards. So I try not to have any like really, like artifacts that just everyone is going to want more than they would want something that's like in line with what their deck is doing. And then also, I prefer for everyone to be at a closer power level to each other for more of the game. So I try to have a cube where players are going to build their mana kind of at the same pace. Um, and so I think both gameplay and the drafting experience is better without this set of cards. Next up, other explosive mana generation. These are cards that let a player get way ahead on mana early. I think they're all pretty high picks, and all of them, and this just goes to what I was saying about wanting players to develop their mana at a similar pace in the cube games to avoid having like a runaway threat or archenemy type situation. I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess that Dowsing Dagger is the most surprising card here. I had it in for my first few drafts of the format, and it was a card that I was valuing and other players weren't, and it gave me just an enormous advantage. I prioritize having a pretty low curve in Commander in general, both in my constructed Commander decks and in my cube draft decks, and it was really easy to find a spot where one of my opponents didn't have a creature, or I was able to make some kind of deal to be able to connect and flip the Dowsing Dagger. The backside of this card is a land that taps for 3 mana, so really, really hard to disrupt once you flip it. You usually flip it the turn that you play it, and again, it's colorless, so any deck, like decks of any colors, can play it. So, and then this one in particular, because it's not a strong card in other formats, I think it's a card that a lot of people who aren't familiar with this cube specifically underrate. And so this one had the added problem that it kind of just gave me specifically a big edge because like I knew not to pass it and other players would pass it. Dockside Extortionist is, a card that I'm, kind of surprised that anyone tolerates it in their games of Commander. It's notoriously explosive and kind of a staple of CDH. Ragavan, I think it's not very realistic to expect every player at the table to be able to defend themselves early, and so if this can get through anywhere, then the player who has it starts building a card and mana advantage pretty early. So it's just another card that can lead to like really lopsided early games. Draga Tree Speaker is just like Soul Ring in disguise. The rest of these are all basically the same situation. They just give a player too much mana too quickly. And I don't want that. So these are more just like really iconic Commander cards. They're cards that are particularly strong in a multiplayer free-for-all game because they give you some kind of an advantage if other players don't spend mana and the other players don't want to spend that mana just to stop you as much as they would want to spend it in a one-on-one game. And so they kind of like break the multiplayer aspect to overperform their like casting cost power level situation because they're costed for one-on-one. Some of these are more egregious than others. Like Rhystic Study is very strong, and I just find it annoying. I think a lot of players do. And like the joke here is very well known. Like everyone understands the power level of these cards. Propaganda and Ghostly Prison aren't really like as explosive or whatever. They just make it so that, you play these and then your opponents generally don't want to bother spending mana to attack you instead of attacking other players. And so they like end up just kind of buying you a lot of life. And I don't think that like this is just a set of cards that I think is not very fun to draft or play with. It's kind of just generically strong and doesn't really like they don't end up in decks that are like doing anything interesting with them. You just kind of play them because the nature of the format makes them strong rather than your deck making them strong. Commander Hosers, these are cards that are strong because of the existence of commanders specifically. Drannith Magistrate stops everybody else from playing their commanders, which just makes the game less fun for everyone. And then Darksteel Mutation and Kenrith's Transformation are usually played to enchant a commander, and then it can be hard for that player to get their commander to die so that they can cast it again and have access to their commander. And I think these things just are significantly net negative fun. I don't think that they're necessarily too powerful. They're just cards that I think make the game worse, so they're not in. If you wanted to play with them, if for some reason you liked being able to host commanders, I don't think that it would disrupt the balance of a game. I just don't think that they add anything valuable. Curse of Opulence and probably some other curses could be in if you were just choosing strong cards. Curse of Opulence in particular is extremely cheap to play and makes attacking the cursed player very desirable to all other players. So this does just a huge amount of damage to a player and puts them at a big mana disadvantage. And because, especially since it costs 1, you kind of just enchant someone you can attack early to start getting gold, and then that player is just at an enormous disadvantage for the rest of the game. I think it makes the game a lot less fun for that player. They didn't really do anything to earn it most of the time, especially because, again, here it's not like there's one player. If someone had a Soul Ring and then they were Curse of Opulence, it would be well, that's fair. I got out way ahead. Of course, you're declaring me the enemy and now everyone's going to attack me for a while. But since the cube is set up so that no one's going to have that kind of big early lead, this just feels really, really swingy, just convincing the person who cast it not to put it on you for whatever kind of lame reason you can come up with. And just too warping for its cost. And then that applies to most other curses. Green cards that search for lands, rampant growth, and cultivate and explosive vegetation, and every card that is similar to any of them. I have no green cards that the only thing that they do is search your library for a land, 1 or more lands, and put it onto the battlefield. I think that these cards are strong. I think that they're boring. I think kind of every green deck generically wants whichever of them they can find. And they're all reasonably high picks and pretty uninteresting as far as objects to draft. And as I've mentioned, I'm very wary of the natural tendency of games of Commander to favor players who have more mana. And so I've kind of gone to great lengths to minimize the disparities that happen there for the most part, or at least make someone really mean it if they want to get an advantage there. And so I think that when I first made my list of cards that I wanted to consider for my cube, these things were on here. I thought they were pretty iconic green cards that were kind of gave definition to the color. But I have felt without these cards, green still plays like green, and the cards that you see in packs instead of these are just more interesting cards. I don't think it would ruin anything to have a few of these, but I have been really happy with not having them personally. Easy finishers. This is roughly another way to just say power level outliers. Usually these are cards that end or threaten to end the game. Too often the player who has these cards wins or threatens to win in a way that's harder to interact with or more powerful than other ways to threaten to win. Thassa's Oracle is maybe the card that I'm most surprised isn't banned in Commander. It's kind of just a go-to end a game out of nowhere for a really wide range of decks in a way that seems like a lot stronger than stuff like Biorhythm or whatever that is banned. Craterhoof Behemoth, like everyone's familiar with, that joke, kind of the default, look, I played some creatures and I'm playing green, now I'm going to kill one or more players card. Bolas's Citadel is another one where, like, I think if the commander banned list cared about controlling power level, it would obviously be gone. The higher starting life totals are considerably abused by Bolas's Citadel, and that this has not been in my cube due to just kind of clearly being too oppressive. Cyclonic Rift, another kind of famously strong commander card. Really good, efficient, easy, like removal spell. Like bouncing a thing is not bad for 2 mana, and then for 7, you just answer literally everything that's going on that you don't have. That can mean killing players who have lost all their defenses, or just being way ahead and building stuff up. Super low opportunity cost to include it in your deck. Generally just too strong and likely to end the game when it's cast. Altar of Dementia is another kind of more subtle, less obvious card to not include, less obvious card to draft early, less powerful in Commander. This card is largely a function of playing 60-card decks instead of 40. The games tend to go long. With 60-card decks in Commander Cube, natural decking comes up. It's like a thing that decks have to worry about in a reasonable portion of games, and I include a lot of cards in my cube that let you loop your library. Cards like Elixir of Immortality and Clear the Mind and Witness the Future and Gaia's Blessing. I have really like a really large number of those cards because I like those effects. I think they're fun, and my cube is really like designed with the idea that you should prioritize some of that. Like a really large portion of decks are interested in having a way to get their graveyard back into their library because the games can just kind of go long, and with only 60 cards sounds weird from a constructed or limited standpoint, but with only 60 cards, playing games the length of Commander games, just decking normally is a real issue. Of course, when everyone's playing a bunch of big creatures and long games, Altar of Dementia makes milling one or more players out a lot easier than you might suspect. Also, free sacrifice outlets are just good generically, letting your creatures go to your graveyard instead of getting exiled. And then this card is kind of nutty in general with Recurring Nightmare. Since whatever creatures you have, you can sack to mill yourself, and then your Recurring Nightmare gets all of them, plus all the stuff that you milled back, and then you still have the Altar of Dementia in place, so you can mill everyone else. Just an example of a card that it works with. So, Altar of Dementia was in for a while. I think, it's a pretty, like, fun card, and it does take a lot of work. Like, you can't end a game on turn 5 with Altar of Dementia. It does only end the game after a game has been played, which is my primary criteria for finishers. But it's cheap and colorless and like good early because of protecting your creatures from being stolen or exiled or whatever. So good early plus good finisher plus colorless was enough to put it over the edge to a point where a lot of people I played with expressed frustration about how strong it was, or how hard dealing with it was, or whatever. And so it ended up getting removed after quite a few games. Sir Conrad Dreadhound. Sir Conrad is really, really messed up. It does so much damage to everyone else all the time when anything happens, and it's a mana sink, and it can be a commander. For constructed players, it might not be obvious that Sir Conrad is one of the strongest commander cards, but it really is. It was in for quite a while, and the player who had it usually won pretty easily. It's in black, so it's easy to recur, and you can just kind of play it anytime the board's getting big and someone's going to have to play a sweeper, but then when they do, everyone else loses a whole bunch of life. So that became pretty clear to me that it needed to not be in. Dreadhound is basically just a weaker Sir Conrad, but so I tried cutting Sir Conrad and leaving Dreadhound in, but again, it was just kind of too much. And I've also felt like in my cube, I kind of think black/red black, weirdly enough, are the strongest colors. I think that that's not really how someone generally thinks of the strength of colors in Commander or Cube and wouldn't expect from Commander Cube. But I think kind of every color in Commander at this point is good at just kind of like generating cards or objects or taking game actions. And red and black kind of do the same thing, except also threaten to kill people really easily. I've kind of joked that like Vicious Shadows and Mind's Dilation, they're both like 7 mana enchantments that are like strong in Commander and not strong in other formats. The difference is Vicious Shadows, when you play it, everyone else dies, and Mind's Dilation, when you play it, you die, because Mind's Dilation makes you a target and doesn't like immediately pay you off. And Vicious Shadows just sets it up so that when things happen, you just deal a bunch of damage to your opponents and kill them. I feel like in general, red and black's expensive cards lead to everyone else kind of dying out of nowhere, whereas like blue, green, and white's expensive cards often tend to lead to threatening to kind of like snowball, but in a way where it's just like you flew too close to the sun and everyone kills you rather than like you win. So I needed to kind of pull back some of black especially's ability to win the game out of nowhere for color balance. So that's Dreadhound and Sir Conrad, and a few other cards that I'll get to. Revel in Riches, the first paragraph is kind of generically strong. A lot of creatures die and treasures are great. And then enchantments are often hard to interact with. And so you end up in this spot where it's also threatening to win the game in a way that people aren't always able to answer. And it just kind of got to be a little bit too much, a little too non-interactive, a little too easy. Pitiless Plunder. This is another one where I think a lot of Commander players know about it and a lot of not Commander players are confused. This is a recent-ish, not very old uncommon that's worth like more than $10 last I checked, because like every Commander deck wants it. It kind of like, it's another one where by itself it's kind of generically great because treasures are so good and creatures die pretty often. And then if you combine it with like roughly anything, it gets just silly. The fact that this triggers off of any creature, not non-token creatures, leads to like a really wide range of nonsense, especially if you start combining this with like Anointed Procession type cards, and things that make a lot of tokens like Adeline and Pentavis or whatever. It's a card that has been in and was just ridiculous, like just way too much mana, way too easily, way too often. Enough to the point where I don't think this is just like a card that gives you a big mana advantage. It's like a card that just gives you so many extra objects and so much extra mana that it usually ends up killing everyone else in a turn or two. Then this is kind of a bit of a catch-all, like for power level outliers / cards that aren't fun to play against. It's like mostly what I meant by oppressive is it stops everyone else from playing the game in some way, in a way that like makes it less fun. So like Glenelanda Archmage, maybe not especially powerful, but when it's in play, no one wants to be the person who casts a spell into it because it's so easy for your opponent to just like stop the next two big things that happen. And so it kind of leads to everyone trying to like not do anything or not play non-creatures for as long as they can. and it's just a card that it's strong. Uh, it would get picked by any blue player, go in any deck, and then get played, and just kind of be frustrating to be a player in a game with it. Grave Pact and Dictate of Erebos. I took them out of my cube at the same time that I took Sir Conrad out. When I realized black just had way too many cards that were way too strong. It was the best color by a lot, and these cards being in play, again, they're kind of hard to deal with, and it's really easy for black to have more creatures than everyone else and have them die whenever you want, and it's really easy to, like, if you have one of these cards, establish a game where for several turns basically no one else can stick a creature, which makes the game not very fun for anyone else and just adds a lot of power to your deck / black in the cube. So they're gone. Deadeye Navigator. This is kind of a like famous strong commander card that was like a bit of a boogeyman of commander many years ago when it came out, and shortly after. Just like a lot of really strong interactions with it that can be hard for anyone to break up because of your ability to protect the things they need to break up using the Deadeye Navigator. Just a little bit too strong and too annoying. Niv-Mizzet was in, and then like if someone has Niv-Mizzet as their commander and someone else is trying to play a small creature deck, they basically just don't participate in the game. You can't keep Niv-Mizzet out of play long enough, and whenever it's in play, all your creatures die. And while Niv-Mizzet as a commander might not beat everybody, it leads to like really uninteresting matchups at least. And so I thought that it just on average made games less fun than having a different commander available would. Namada is a similar situation. Namada I never put in my cube because I think it's just too strong and hates on graveyards too much. Like I do have Laisa, I think, the black-white angel that also exiles your opponent's stuff. That one I could see cutting because, again, all of your stuff getting exiled can be really problematic for some decks. So it's like Niv-Mizzet, where if you happen to play against this, it's hard for your deck to function in a way that's just kind of frustrating. But Namada costs less mana, and I think just kind of does more, is more game warping. Again, I haven't played with it. If for some reason you like it, feel free to try it out. It seems like one that it would make games a lot less fun rather than more fun, in addition to just being a little too strong overall. Really easy to have decks that can get a lot of value out of the Saproling creation and stuff. Fortunately, Grave Pact, Dictate, Sir Conrad, and Dreadhound aren't in. All of those would make Namada even sillier, but I just didn't want to go there. And then Ziatora, the Incinerator. This is another card that was in, and then I played a game or two with it as my commander, and it was just silly. It was just so strong. It's not, I mean, it is kind of oppressive because you get this like repeated removal spell out of your commander that can kind of stop other people from doing stuff. Like you just kill the best creature at the end of each of your turns. But then the bigger problem is just the treasures that it makes. You just get so much extra mana and get to do like really big things. And then there are also objects in case you're trying to like Warp World or the Great Aurora, which are both in its colors and stuff. So this one is mostly just a power level outlier as a commander. In the context of this cube, it was just too strong. Land tax is like both an absurd amount of card advantage for a 1-mana card. You basically like never miss a land drop again if you get to activate it like once ever. And if you're not the starting player, it's trivial to activate it, and it kind of takes advantage of the like same thing as taxing, where in a 2-player game, someone might not play lands, so you can't get like you can't make this active, but in a 4-player game, like probably someone's going to be ahead of you on lands, and you'll get to do this thing. And then I also don't like library searching at all, but certainly not repeated library searching, waiting for a player to search and shuffle their library every upkeep, especially since it's in their upkeep, and so they have to resolve the shuffle before they can even take their draw step. It just slows games down a lot in addition to being too strong. Hermit Druid, kind of similar situation. Resolving it can take a long time because sometimes you have to reveal a lot of cards one at a time to find the basic, and then also it's just getting an absurd amount of card advantage plus all the graveyard value for like one card. So these cards are both kind of like they slow the game down a lot, and they're like they just give you a whole bunch of extra lands and other value. So nope. The cube doesn't have 2-card combos. While they don't come up very often because the cube is so big and there's not library manipulation and everything, when they do come up, just kind of ends the game in a really disappointing way. So Heliod is removed because I didn't want to have both Heliod and Walking Ballista in the cube, and I think Walking Ballista is cooler. And Kiki Jiki was removed because it goes infinite with a whole bunch of different stuff, and I didn't want to remove all of those fun cards like Restoration Angel and Zealous Conscripts. And Fable the Mirror Breaker exists and lets you do some of the Kiki Jiki stuff in a way that is much harder to combo with. So these are both gone for that reason. Finally, this cycle. I don't know what to say about this cycle. I think it's like... I think cheaper commanders are better by default, and this cycle really rewards playing a cheaper commander. I think that these cards are just kind of ludicrously strong in a really uninteresting way. They seem designed to make cards that would sell product to commander players who would all need the appropriate ones for their decks without messing up other formats because they don't do anything there. I think that this whole cycle is kind of just like gross aesthetically as a design, and I hate them, and they're not in the cube. That's what I have to say about that. So that's my list. Those are the cards that there are a few other random cards that aren't in that may or may not be worth calling out as not in. Like Dark Ritual and Underworld Breach are like popular cards in Commander that aren't in my cube because combo's not really supported and they wouldn't really have a place. There's a lot of stuff like that. But these are the cards that like I feel would most mess things up if they were in, or I wanted to say something else about, or they, whatever. These are the cards that I've chosen to tell you I have chosen not to include in my cube. So hopefully that's illuminating about more of the philosophy behind the cube, or has given you something to think about in terms of thinking about when and where you want to play with these cards in your own games. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want more content like this, and have fun playing Magic. All right. Bye for now. I'll be back with another video shortly.